So my presentation is, as I mentioned, not very long. So what we've decided to try to bring to you is what we thought would be most useful to share for somebody who is considering either designing or improving their system of program and performance budgeting. So from the perspective of our experience with PEMPAL region, we here have, let's say, highlighted some of the key design characteristics that we think would be the most important to take into account. And this is right. This is based on the experience of our PEMPAL countries, but even more so experience of advanced countries, OECD countries, and so on. Some of which have, decades of experience in the program and performance budgeting, and yet they continually modernize their system. From what I saw in your meeting material, you had good presentations already from the colleagues of Ivor from the World Bank perspective, and also the colleagues from the European Commission. So you have heard, you will have heard many of the points maybe that we will make in this presentation. But again, from our perspective of the countries that are maybe a bit more or a little less advanced and experienced than OECD countries, this would be what we would give to you as our main messages or our main advice. As I mentioned, I will say a few words about that, and then the key part of the presentation will be about the practices, some general trends and practices in our PEMPAL countries, and then very briefly in the end to tell you a little bit about our working group in this area, because we actually have operated, BCOP in PEMPAL has operated a working group dedicated specifically to program and performance budgeting since 2016. And this is actually one area, you probably have similar practices. So what we do in PEMPAL is we survey our member countries, member ministries of finance from the budget departments on an annual basis to collect their priority topics or thematic areas that they would like us to examine in the following year. And basically, since 2016, we have this area of program and performance budgeting as the top area that is still of interest of our ministries of finance. And this is why we have, as I mentioned, operated this working group. So very briefly, I will not go too much into the definitions. You have, as I mentioned, already discussed that in the morning. But what I would like to highlight out of the definition of performance and program budgeting is the point that this is to inform discussions and decisions around the budget. I will touch upon this a bit later, but I think we can safely say that at the global level, we have all moved from this previous intention that we can be basing our budgets specifically or solely on performance information. So it was, as you remember, maybe before it was performance-based budgeting. Now, I think with the conscience and experience that we have had over the decades of the implementations, we are moving to the performance-informed budgeting. And this has to do with several drawbacks or several complexity of the performance and program budgeting in the public sector that has now deemed not best practice to actually decide budget allocations solely on performance information. So this is about this informing discussions and decisions around the budget not being the sole decision making factor, as to say. What I would also like to say, you have heard me already using this terminology, program and performance budgeting. In most cases, and in line with the best global practices, performance information, indicators, and so on, are linked to the program budgeting structure, programs, sub-programs, activities, depending on, how the country structures this whole structure. Let's say in PEMPAL countries, in pretty much all of the cases, we have this already in place in that the performance part is always connected to the program part. So this is why we call this program and performance budgeting. The key thing, I believe, before, again, going on the road of either designing or improving your system for program and performance budgeting, is to actually take a step back and look at the big picture, which is why we're doing this. This is not an easy reform. This is not an easy reform, I repeat. And again, this has been confirmed by years and years and decades of experience from even the most advanced countries. It is not the most easy reform, and it's quite resource and time intensive for the civil service. So it's very important that we do it not for the, let's say, box ticking exercise, but that this is actually something that's useful and that's used. Because without it being useful and used, this is a whole lot of effort for maybe not the benefits. We cannot reap the benefits if it's not properly or fully used, as to say. So what is the main point here? The main point is that we're trying to shift the budgeting focus a bit away from the financial compliance only, and to also focus on accountability for results, what it is that we are achieving for the budget money. And it's always from the final user perspective. So citizen in many cases, or in other part of administration, because we know that not all of our ministries and agencies have, let's say, easy mandates of working directly with citizens, which is a bit easier to measure than some other ministries, let's say Ministry of Foreign Affairs or so on. So whoever is the main key user of the services, that's what the whole focus should be. That's the point of program and performance budgeting. So by doing that, we shift the discussion from inputs, how much we spent on salaries, material costs, travel costs, to actually what it is that we've done for the users. In doing all of this, we inherently also shift the focus more towards midterm budgeting. And very importantly, we also improve budget understandability for the external parties, the citizens, but also civil society organizations, media, even parliament to some extent can be in this category, because it's much easier and transparent for them to look at the actual results of the spending than, again, to have only information on the economic lines. This is all very simple, and it may sound too simple, but again, we need to keep this in mind. This is why we're doing this. If the system of the program and performance budgeting that we are installing does not support all of these simple ideas, then it should be reconsidered, in our opinion. So what are the potential benefits of PPB? And I keep saying potential because, again, unless it's designed in a way that can be useful and used, the benefits will not be the maximum. But the potential benefits, of course, for budget users, line ministries and agencies, is that they can use this as a better management tool by linking their strategic and budget planning. And we'll talk about this a bit later. The government itself, the cabinet, the ministries, council of ministries, depending on the language terminology in each country, but they are provided with a more direct tool for policy prioritization. So that for putting government priorities into action, so that they can clearly see what it is if they want one area of to prioritize, so they can see more clearly what it is that they need to either take money away from or reprioritize. Parliament is provided with a better oversight tool because, again, they have now the data and they have on program level, and they have this contextual information on performance. Citizens are provided with a transparency tool, again, with the increased clarity and context. And also in terms of the auditors, they now have a better tool to do performance audits and other let's say, supporting tools. So what are the recommended characteristics of this modernized PPP design that we would like additionally to draw your attention to? As I mentioned, PPB has evolved drastically, I would say. And this is, again, based on what was shown as working or not working in the actual implementation of many countries, again, including the most advanced countries. I already touched about on this moving toward performance informed as opposed to performance based budgeting, which would have direct link between budget allocation and units of performance. Reasons for that, I don't think I need to go to. It's quite clear. There's potentials for manipulation of data, but also in the heart of the issue is just the nature of the public sector. It's not as easy and private sector to connect outcomes to money. And it's a very complex reality of how the public sector works. So this was all really shown in the experience. And now we are looking at this performance-informed budgeting, where this information provides us contextual information, but again, not one-to-one relationship. Second one is very important, and that is something that our PEMPAL countries have definitely gone through and are still going through. And this is the importance of simplification and streamlining of both budget program structure and also performance indicators. What we've had is too many indicators in many cases, which stems from many different reasons. One of the reasons was that sometimes line ministries get a bit nervous that maybe their work is not shown enough, and then they're very eager to show absolutely everything, to count even the smallest things, let's say. In terms of the budget program structure, we had cases in which it was very multi-layered, so that it was the budget was really fragmented into very small parts. So we had, let's say, general programs, sub-programs, activities, projects. So it was a lot of documentation. And what was also very important is that when you slice the budget into so many levels, into such a small units in the end, you actually limit the flexibility of program managers. And that's not the point of program budgeting, right? We've done the program budgeting so that we can tell our managers, listen, we'll give you a bit more flexibility, but now you're going to be accountable for results. So we cannot do both. We cannot ask for them the accountability results and then also strangle their flexibility more. So I think this is something that's very important to note. Of course, not to mention the sheer volume of the budget documents and the work and the complication in budget execution, treasury system, if the budget program structure is too fragmented and if we have too many indicators, let's just say. The next one is also a no-brainer. I think we've all now are clear on this. It's every country really should customize their own PPB model to their own specificities, capacities, needs, and very importantly, administrative culture. Adequate investment is needed in human resources and also data infrastructure in order to support these efforts. Political support is crucial. What we've had, I don't know what your experience is in your region. In our region, in the early efforts, we've had in many cases where the Ministry of Finance took all of the burden on the program and performance budgeting on itself. And the line ministries were not involved or engaged enough, and they really didn't even feel the ownership of the whole PPB. And this was because maybe their capacity was lower, so Ministry of Finance was trying to kind of do it all. And it's not, first of all, they cannot, it's too much work. And second of all, Ministry of Finance should not do that. It's the line ministries, line ministers that knows their areas the best, and it's them who are accountable for the results. So they have to be involved. Ministry of Finance can, of course, should give the standard procedures and criteria, and Ministry of Finance should have the challenge role, but the ownership of the line ministries cannot be underestimated. Linking strategic planning and program performance budgeting is also very important. Again, the whole point of program budgeting and performance budgeting is strategic objectives, right? But what we've had, again, in PEMPAL in early efforts was that maybe this link was not strong enough. And some reasons, one of the reasons in many countries was that actually strategic planning itself was not strong enough, or it wasn't, let's say, standardized enough in order for it to be able to be used alongside with the program and performance budgeting. And you will see in many of our countries, I think Nadia will also talk about this, we are now hand in hand trying, let's say, to simplify and merge strategic planning and PPB. PPB system, again, should be designed in a way that ensures its practical implementability for each country. Each country knows what this means for itself. Again, looking at how things work in your administration. Some of the main element is we need to realize that we need to have a mix of performance measures to capture the variety of dimensions of our public sector. We also need to make sure that there is some alignment with the administrative responsibilities and service delivery functions. Again, in the early effort, some of the advanced countries had different kind of thinking, in the sense that it doesn't matter how the ministry or the line ministry is structured. We are looking at the objectives and performance. But what we have seen through the years is that unless there's a clear hierarchical structure, so that we know who is accountable for results, it's very hard, again, to reap the maximum benefits. Now, that may mean in many cases that once the program and performance budgeting starts being implemented, the line ministry themselves or the government will realize that some of these internal institutional administration, organizational, let's say, charts are not done properly, that there's space for improvements and so on. But we still don't think that it's possible to completely ignore the organizational structure when looking at the budget programs structure, because again, in the implementation for accountability for results would then be harder to establish. The two last points are extremely important, and this is that we should all understand that program and performance budgeting, it's not just a budgeting reform. It's, in its essence, when you look at it, it's actually public sector reform. So again, all of these efforts need to go beyond just the budgeting. The government efforts should be, let's say, serious to go into all of these other elements, such as the public administration, human resources, and so on. At the end of it, it's also, the key thing is to remember what is the end point of program and performance budgeting. And it is not to have some kind of point of time when we will have perfect programs and perfect performance indicators for each ministry. This is not the end point. This is not why this is done. The whole point of program and performance budgeting is it's in the process itself, the process of, management sitting and looking at the results, trying to adjust when needed. Again, the whole point is that as we go, we focus more on results. So we shouldn't be boggled by looking at and finding some perfect structures of programs and perfect performance indicators, because this is not the whole point. The whole point is this, let's say, learning-oriented public sector management. I will not go into this, but just very briefly, this is this discussion on connecting strategic planning with program and performance budgeting. So the way we see it is this hierarchical pyramid structure. And in this structure, what we have at the very top is the national level or government level strategic planning. So again, this is different names in different countries. Many of our countries are EU members or candidates or potential candidates. So we would have something that's called National Development Plan or similar. So this is whole of the government strategic thinking, let's say. And in many cases there we have this key KNIs, which is key national indicators. And the next point or the next part, the middle part of the pyramid, is where budget planning comes into. And this is the place where we actually take the national priorities and, let's say, operationalize them a bit more into these budget programs and performance indicators used for budgeting. And then you will notice that the fattest part of the pyramid is the bottom, and this is where we have actually institutional planning. So this is planning at the level of line ministries or agencies. There we have lots of details. We have very detailed, the things that I mentioned before, activities, projects, whatever you call it, that are very, let's say, small and fragmented. We have many indicators. So at this level, we would have these lowest level indicators, such as process indicators, and some output indicators. And then for the budget part, we would have higher level indicators, such as mid-outcome indicators and some high output indicators, while again, at the strategic level, strategic planning at the national level on the top would be the highest level outcomes. This, again, seems like a simple exercise, but it's important to go through it and to make these connections. I think Nadia will present on how they do it in their templates. So it's very important to go through these exercises, in our opinion, because if done properly, this is what's going to make sure that our budget document is not overwhelmed, that it's not overburdened with too many indicators and too many, budget program levels, that it's this middle point, while the details go into institutional planning. planning. And all of this needs to be, of course, vertically connected to each other. So those were some of the, let's say, general pointers we would advise to somebody or to a country that is now looking at either going, imaginary country that is going either from the start, or a country that is trying to redesign or improve their systems. In terms of where we are as a region in program and performance budgeting, first of all, just to mention in case some of you do not know, so PEMPAL covers the countries in Europe and Central Asia. We have around 20 countries, and so they range from countries that are EU members, such as Croatia, Romania, Bulgaria, to countries all the way geographically to Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyz Republic, and so on. So it's a very large variety of countries in terms of the advancement in this topic of programs and performance budgeting. So it's not easy to capture average, let's say. I'm sure you have similar experiences with PEMNA. But here are some of the, let's say, key trends that we see, or the key characteristics. So now we came to the stage where pretty much all of PEMPAL countries implement some form of program and performance budgeting. And in most cases, this is a uniform coverage applicable to all ministries and agencies. What we had in some earlier stages were either piloting or partial coverage. So we had these, let's say, special government programs or special parts of the budget that were to be done in this program and performance budgeting format, but it wasn't the full expenditure. Now we are going towards basically most countries going towards this uniform coverage applicable to all ministries and agencies. In terms of the legal basis, the way our region works is that legal base is extremely important. Again, this is also depending on your administrative system and history. And in most cases, the legal basis is in the organic budget law. We did not have any separate law on performance budgeting at the time of this survey, which was 2020. But most of the countries, again, had them in the organic budget law. Most PEMPAL countries describe their practices as presentational approach. I think I saw you went into details of this characterization in the presentation, I think, from the EU colleague. So I will not go into details, but again, presentational approach is where there's performance information provided within the budget documentation, either in annex or in some additional documentation, but it is not used in discussions on decisions on the budget. But we, again, have a clear trend towards countries going towards this performance-informed approach, in which we do use performance information more and more. I mentioned this before, but the issue or the challenge that we've had in the early efforts of PPP reforms in PEMPAL countries, to some extent it still stands, and that is the fact that Ministry of Finance took most of the burden on itself compared to the best practices or OECD countries. So I will not go into details here, but what we have seen, again, now we are going towards the line ministries being more increasingly involved. And again, I think Nadia will share some of their good experiences on that. Also, compared to the OECD countries, what we have in our region is that role of legislator, the parliament and supreme audit is more limited. For example, in OECD countries, I mentioned performance audit before, SAA is quite involved, and parliament discussion also are based on performance information. Looking again, generally in our region, again, noting the differences from country to country, but on average, in most cases, the role is still quite limited. Another difference from comparing our region to OECD countries, that we have quite a frequent role in this of either the chief executive, so the cabinet or the government, or the economic planning ministry or agency in our region, which is not present in the OECD countries to some extent. One area in which when you look at PEMPAL region compared to OECD, where we lagged behind the most, maybe is this evaluation and scrutiny of performance. So quality assurance and what comes after, let's say, information being in budget. This is something that is lacking still in most cases. But again, this is not unusual for given the fact that our countries have started their PP journey much later than OECD countries in most cases. We also already see this decreasing volume of performance indicators in many countries. We have understood, again, that we should not overburden the budget with too many performance indicators, with lower level indicators such as process indicators, number of documents, number of meetings, number of such indicators, with increasing quality at the same time, and also this improving the scope of program. As I mentioned before, again, avoiding this over-fragmented, very low levels of, program, sub-program activities, projects that makes it too fragmented. We've seen that this trend is already happening. Another challenge is with the cross-cutting indicators. And again, I'm very happy that Nadia will present their innovations in this area. Cross-cutting indicators, of course, are most challenging. And in general, what we had is that in PEMPAL countries, we had them used less than in countries that are more advanced or experienced in PPB from the OECD region. When we look at what it is that our countries wanted to achieve with PPP, and then what they self-assess as being achieved with PPP, what we see is that the most successful, let's say, objective was transparency. And this is similar to the OECD, so there's nothing. However, where maybe this objective was not realized to the same extent was, of course, with accountability. So accountability was where accountability of the managers and, line ministries for results. There we see that there's a bit of a gap between what was expected and what was achieved. Again, in terms of what was accepted and what was achieved, actually also for OECD countries, there's also a gap in all of this, meaning that, again, even in the most advanced countries, not every hoped objective was realized. But what we see in PEMPAL countries is this gap was even higher, right? So we expected maybe even more than OECD countries reported that they expected in some of the areas, such as allocation and prioritization, and especially promoting the culture of performance in the public sector compared to what was actually achieved up to this survey, which was done a few years ago. Again, use of performance information continues to increase in our countries by different stakeholders, including program managers, ministers, and senior civil servants, as well as civil society in media. And use of budget negotiation is also increasing somewhat. All of the countries cite some unquantifiable benefits of PPB, but of course it's very difficult to report, to quantify PPP benefits, and OECD countries also have not been, let's say, successful with quantifying actual benefits. Maybe at this point, just to also stress that what we have, I mentioned already, several countries are doing some serious investing some serious efforts into improving their systems. So maybe at this point, I can maybe mention a few countries from PEMPAL. So one of them is, of course, Georgia, from which you will hear. Bulgaria is another one. Bosnia and Herzegovina is another one. Croatia is also looking into improving their system. Serbia has done also quite a lot. So many of our countries are working on this quite seriously in this recent period. When we look at the challenges overall, not surprisingly, our countries single out lack of cultural performance as the most serious challenge still, as well as a lack of leadership and commitment, and poorly formulated indicators and targets. So these challenges look a bit different than they look for OECD countries, but they are very clearly connected to the fact that for most of our countries, we have started our PPB journeys a bit later than OECD countries. So maybe they have already gone or jumped through some of these hurdles, such as lack of leadership and commitments, while in our countries, we are still dealing with that. So that was some of the main trends. At this point, I would just like to conclude and to give floor to Nadia after the questions, but just to give you a few words about the work of our program and performance budgeting working group in PEMPAL. As I mentioned, this working group is very active. It's been working since 2016. It focuses on design and implementation of program and performance budgeting and spending reviews. because spending reviews are, you know, another tool, let's say a performance tool, and we look at that those two tools together as one, so PPB and spending reviews, with the aim of improving spending effectiveness. We cooperate very closely with the OECD Budgeting and Public Expenditure Division, with the OECD network of senior budget officials for Central and Eastern Europe, as well as with the OECD Working Party for Performance and Results. And the results that I showed you before is from a survey that we conducted for PEMPAL countries, modeled after the exact same survey that the OECD countries, that the OECD conducts among OECD countries. And we are actually right now about to launch the next version of this survey. So Natia and the rest of the colleagues will be hearing from us very soon, today or tomorrow. We are launching the new round of the survey, so we will see how much we have advanced since the last data stock-taking exercise, let's say. Our working group has several knowledge products that have been produced. All of these are with the links, so I believe you have this in material, so you can click and look at our knowledge products. Some of them, as I mentioned, are focused on spending reviews, some of them on PPB, and some of them on both. And we are currently, in addition to this new round of survey on PPB, also working on a knowledge product specifically devoted to linking strategic planning and budgeting. And we have engaged our mutual friend now, Ivor, who has provided a presentation earlier today for you, I believe, and he's helping us to develop this knowledge product. Our working group has looked at this topic or selected this topic for knowledge product because it was a common, let's say, challenge or common area where everybody wanted to learn in this PPP thematic universe, let's say. So I will stop now here in order to not take any more of your time. So I believe we are now gonna move into the Q&A. If you could please advise me if you would like me to stop sharing or...
Yes, thanks a lot, Naida.